Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to episode 5 of season 8 of the SSF Romcast. I am, as always, part one of your hosting team, Jessica, and joined by, firstly,
Emma Jackson, as always. And we are also delighted to have a guest here with us. We have author Stephanie Burgis, who's come to tell us about her latest book, Wooing the Witch Queen, which we've both read and
we
love.
have indeed.
Um, and yeah, so we kind of we don't do a tell us the blurb, tell us the premise kind of thing, but it's more just a little bit about it and the kind of readers it will appeal to.
Absolutely. So, Wooing the Witch Queen, this is a mouthful. I always think of it as my gender flipped gothic fantasy rom com because
Yeah.
this time the innocent who is running and seeks shelter under a disguised name at the sinister, brooding castle, okay, is the hero, Felix. And this time, the sinister, brooding castle's owner, who is powerful and magical and feared by everyone, is the queen, the heroine Saskia. And she is a terrifying witch queen who, according to rumor all across the continent, surrounds herself with an army of monsters who she would actually, as it turns out, describe as her found family. you know, and Felix comes running to her for safety, ends up not intentionally, ends up being hired as her librarian of magic, despite not actually being the dark wizard she thinks he is, and ends up finding a home and falling deeply in love for the terrifying witch queen.
Of course. I love that about how he was like so wow whenever she was being sort of powerful and he was like, oh yeah,
Yes.
that's the
He loves
stuff.
it.
Yeah, he
He
had that
really loves
moment,
it.
didn't he? Oh, you could
Not
see it.
threatened in the
No,
slightest
he
by
was
a
there
powerful
for
woman.
all of it. So, yeah, you've mentioned the two sides. We have the differing countries with the Emperor and Saskia, and it plays a big part in the external plot. How did you go about building those two worlds and pushing them together?
Well, a lot of it came from the fact that I've just always been a history geek. Even when I was a little kid, I was a history geek. So, where I ended up, this is a fantasy world. It's not our world, but it was easy to think about sort of in a parallel world shaped very similar to ours, and thinking of um, sort of an alternate version of mid 19th century where the Holy Roman Empire had sort of not only gained in strength, it had spread even more than in our world, and into the point where there are only a few kingdoms sort of clinging along the sides. And what's even more rare is to have a kingdom that's ruled by an independent queen. So in this case, three queens,
Mm.
all for whatever reason reviled across the continent, have formed sort of a club, a protection alliance, uh, because they know the new emperor Otto II is desperate to achieve glory by trying to basically replicate the first Seraphin Empire of thousands of years ago and spread across the entire continent. And they are determined to keep their own nation safe. And like the Holy Roman Empire, it's made up of a bunch of little archduchies, each of them ruled by the person who would have been, the king otherwise. But it's an archduke ruling underneath the emperor. And Felix, the hero of this book, was born to be the archduke. And everyone assumes that he is very happy as the archduke, and Saskia certainly hates him without ever having met him because of the things that the Archduke of Asturian has ordered, as their
Yeah.
bordering countries. But in fact, again, this is going back to my love of 19th century history and stuff. I based this on various um, situations I'd read about. In fact, Felix has been abused and controlled by first his regent, who then became his chief minister, for almost his entire life. He has not been behind any of the political decisions that Saskia hates. And the reason he comes running to her in the first place is because she's the only person he could think of who would actually stand up to the guy who's been controlling him.
Yeah. Uh, that's interesting. So does it give like a little bit of a clue then, if you know some of that history? Because I have to admit, I didn't click. Sometimes when you're reading fantasy, you can be like, oh, I can see which era this is sort of similar to and stuff. That one didn't click for me. Um, but if you know it, is that going to give a little bit of a clue about how things are going to progress in the series? Because they've got
Well,
the Emperor, haven't they? Sort of still a threat.
absolutely. The Emperor is very much a threat. The Emperor's uh, ambitions for spreading across the continent are very much a threat, and especially the fact that he's found this political pretext, which is purification, and which is uh, in this context, it's used by this fanatical little what most people think of as a fringe group in the empire. Surely no one would really, agree with them. But the
Mhm.
emperor thinks this is going to be a great pretext. The purifiers think that all of the non-humans on the continent do not deserve to be there. They need to be gotten rid of for the human safety. And of course, this directly threatens Saskia's found family of non-humans. It directly threatens every, queen in the alliance. And so yeah, that's the overarching political issue that all
Mhm.
three queens are going to have to face across the trilogy. So I'm writing the trilogy in hopes that each book can function as a standalone, but also
Yeah.
there's that overarching story that you'll get when you read all three of them.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, that's we've had similar things and stuff we've worked on in that
Yes.
it's lovely having that standalone romance and being able to pick it up, but then it gets
The,
tricky, doesn't it? When
yeah,
you're
It
the
trying
is.
to
building
like
of the next bit. Yeah.
yeah, move the story along. You're on book three of yours, aren't you, Jess?
I am indeed trying to remember what happened in the first one to go, okay, what am I supposed to be doing with that now?
Yeah,
But
and
I
it's
have to
the
say, I was like, when I read it and I saw the three queens together, my brain kind of went, oh, please, for the love of God, be three. Please, all
Yes.
of their books. I was
yes.
there. I am here for it.
I'm so glad to hear that because
Oh,
I've 1 week away from turning in my edits on book two, which is Lorelai's book, The Fae Queen,
oh,
Enchanting the Fae Queen. And then I'm going to be hopping right into book three, Melting the Ice Queen.
Wow,
excellent.
brilliant. So like our last guest, Desiree, you are a hybrid author in that you
Mhm.
publish traditionally and self-publish. I was just wondering, how do you decide what projects you're gonna seek traditional publishing for, or do you just know straight off the bat, this one is definitely a self-published one that I'm gonna be doing and following it through and sort of the balance of those because obviously that is a lot of work
Mm,
once you get into a contract like you say you're doing your edits and straight on to the next and
absolutely.
yeah
Yeah. Well, I first started self publishing I started seriously self publishing. I'd done a couple of short stories and things before just to sort of tide over my readers because it was a few years between books. And actually, part of the story is that I was I wrote a novella, Snow Spelled, and I couldn't decide whether I should submit it somewhere to be published or whether I should do it myself. And I wrote to this author group I'm part of, which is full of many more established fantasy authors. I mean, I was lucky because I was invited in when I sold my first book back in 2008. Um, so at the time, now I'm a fairly established author, but I was not then. And even in 2016, I certainly didn't feel that way. And Alona Andrews wrote back. She sort of challenged me. She said, "Look, I've looked at the stories you've put out, and these are good stories, and you're not doing anything for them. You're just sort of putting them out there." And she challenged me to take self-publishing seriously. And she said, "These,
okay
you know, you need to treat your work with respect and really go for it. Don't just
wow
sort of slide it out there saying what book you
yeah
want."
wow
So
sometimes that
eh,
is hard to hear but very
Yes.
useful
But you
yeah
need
it
to, yeah.
it really was. And I have to tell you, Alona, after having gone through, she did this incredible thing, which was that she recommended one of my stories to her readers on her blog. That weekend, I, after, I don't know, I probably made, oh gosh, maybe $100 on that story before that weekend. Her readers bought so many, I made $1,200, which paid for me to go all out on my first serious self-publishing cover for Snowspelled. I actually hired a real artist based on the money from Alona's readers. Thank you to any of them who are listening to this. And um, and from that was when I started seriously self-publishing, was with Snowspelled, and that made a wonderful splash. It was a wonderful surprise because actually, although it was a novella, it made me more money than my first two adult romantasy books had that have been traditionally published. Um, I and I thought, wow, this is actually a serious option at this point. And at that particular point, I was trying to focus mostly on my middle grade fantasy work because I had some very good contracts with Bloomsbury that deserved, my main focus. And I just did not have the time and energy to write one full novel in each genre every year.
Yeah.
So self-publishing became this perfect way to fit in the romantasy I loved writing and I didn't want to give up, while still getting that full novel turned in on time. And I love middle grade too. I don't want to disparage that in any way.
No.
But, tides turn, things go up and down. And actually what happened was I had completed my last middle grade contract and my agent called me. And at that point, I had just been self-publishing all of my adult stuff for a while. She sold me my audio rights, for some of my self-published books, which is great. But I was mostly just asking her to handle my middle grades. And then she came back, I think it was in 2023. I think it was as recently as that. I can't. And she said, I've just come back from the Bologna Literary Festival. Everyone's talking romantasy. You write romantasy. Give me something I can sell.
Oh, brilliant.
And I was like, well, I have had this idea for this series, Queens of Villainy, that I've been wanting to write for years. But, I really wanted them to be full novels and I couldn't justify the time to do that. So I kept thinking, well, should I just write them as sort of mini novellas and get them out that way? But that's a little, didn't feel quite right. And so Molly said, look, just let me try. You can always say no. Because, I was remembering my experience back in 2015 and 16 when I sold novels to it was a division of Penguin Random House in America, but a very small division. And it was after my agent fees, it was $5,000 a book. And I thought, I can do better self-publishing.
Yeah.
Well, she took my first 3 chapters and the proposal I wrote for her. And within 2 months, it had gone to auction. Wow. Fantastic deal. So that was how I ended up trad publishing these. And I have been absolutely thrilled. I've been with Tor Bramble in the US, and there's actually separate companies, but Tor Bramble in both the US and the UK ended up taking them.
Yeah.
And I've been absolutely thrilled with them. I'm still putting out stuff on my own though. Sometimes partly because I just like the flexibility of being able to write stuff that's just for fun and not have to worry about justifying it to a sales team.
Yeah.
Because as you know, whenever you and partly because I want to keep a relationship with the readers who really came on during the self-publishing time. My Patreon has been a wonderful, nurturing community ever since the end of 2019. And actually, I did write one project that I knew was going to be self-publishing from the beginning because there was no way I could have sold it anywhere else. But on Patreon, I could play with it. It's my collection, Good Neighbors, where I told, cute. Yes,
that was the first one I read of yours.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
I have written that for trad publishing because it's a rom-com fantasy let's see, it's a cozy, spooky fantasy rom-com about a grumpy metalworker and the flamboyant and flirtatious necromancer next door. And I wrote it as a series of stories that get longer as it goes. So it's a short story, then a novelette, then two longer novellas. And all together, it forms one book. And I mean, you can't sell that structure in traditional
No.
publishing. So if I had only been trad publishing, I would have thought, oh, that would be fun, but I'm not going to do it. Whereas because I was self-publishing, I could say, yeah, this would be a really fun project.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like novellas and short stories and things. Like, I am quite often very much just in the mood for that. That's what I want.
Yes.
You've read something big or you've read something in a different genre, and then you're like, I just want a little taste of something over here. And, you
Yes.
know,
yeah,
it's
this is it.
brilliant.
This is exactly what I was going to say. As a reader, that sounds fantastic to me that
Yeah.
I can just, the kids are down, this is this, I've got half an
Mm-hmm.
hour, in I go for a bit, and it's just, oh, chef's kiss of it, love it.
But you can see
Me
why in
too.
traditional publishing they're like, oh, well, we've got to put all the resource on that, but
Yeah.
it's only this little
Right.
bite-sized thing.
Hmm.
You can see why they're like, no, we
Yeah,
want to
we
focus
know.
on longer things. But novellas, I feel like, particularly in romance, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's readers love picking up that. I mean, like
They
Yeah.
do.
a lot
I,
of the Mills and
mm.
Boon are pretty much like a novella length, really, aren't they? Like 55,000 words is not
There's a
not
bit of a
quite full
tradition
length.
in romance publishing, or at least I think especially historical romance, of these collections that are sort of little
Yes.
novellas of very popular authors. Because I
Yeah.
bought some of those in the past just to get an Eloisa James or a Julia Quinn,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
and actually I still remember back in the early 2000 teens. I was actually, for a while, I was a romance book blogger because I love romance. I was actually already publishing my middle grade by then, and I wasn't writing any romance. So I was like, well, I could at least write about romance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I remember it was just as electronic books were like really becoming a thing. And that was just as I got my first Kindle. And I discovered um, Eloisa James and a couple of other historical romance authors, I think Carolyn Linden and some others, they were releasing these standalone historical romance novellas. And I was like, this is amazing. This is
Mm-hmm.
just, you get a perfect jolt, like an infusion of just what you want, but you don't have to commit,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a whole week. You can say, I feel bad tonight. What shall I read to make me feel better? And you'll be done at the end of the night.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I
then
love it
life
at
continues.
Christmas. I love Christmas novellas
Yes.
because I don't have the time. I want the mood, I want the coziness and the feel, but it's like it's Christmas time. I don't have time to get sucked into a whole
Yes.
novel.
Yes.
Like you say, it's just I want to just sit down and relax for this hour that I've got. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I need a question now, but I'm kind of like, I
Yes,
want to keep
sorry.
talking about this.
Yeah.
But all right, yeah, let's continue. Okay, so it's not a spoiler. We already know about Felix kind of coming to Saskia, kind of, yeah, mysterious, not who he is supposed to be. Um, did you find it difficult to decide when and how for him to reveal who he truly was, especially with who he is?
Yes, because of course, who he really is the person that she has always considered her nation's greatest enemy. And um, a lot of the stuff that's come out, over the years is saying from the Archduke of Astarion, the Archduke of Astarion is, kicking out non-magical creatures, which Felix would never do, but his, the guy actually in charge did, etc. So, and that's actually part of how Felix ends up in the situation in the first place, is he comes to her wanting to seek refuge and ask for amnesty. But when he gets there, not only does she assume, since he's covered in a cloak,
Mhm.
that he is the dark wizard she's just advertised for, but he immediately overhears her saying that, of course, she'll kill the Archduke of Astarion as soon as, if she ever gets the chance. So he's like, maybe I won't introduce myself. So, yeah, but then, of course, anytime there's a disguise element, it's going to get harder and harder across the book is more and more feelings get involved. And it was a really tricky thing to balance as I went along, because Felix is incredibly ethical. He is a genuinely kind person. He does not like lying to people he cares about. And I and he doesn't want to take advantage of Saskia's ignorance in that way any more than I think I, as a reader, would want him to. um, so it was really a process of figuring out, okay, when is it going to get too much? When is he going to decide he has to tell her? And it was at that most crucial point, the first like maximum tension, and but also at one point, can they not have a relationship without him telling her everything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find secret identity ones quite stressful. Okay.
Yes.
I get like, oh,
Yeah. Is it,
because
is it, is it now?
yeah, it like you say, it just kind of gets worse. The stakes raise and raise
Mm-hmm.
and raise, don't they? Because the more they get feelings for each other, the more
Yeah.
it's the betrayal is gonna hit harder and harder. So they get stuck in this situation of, yeah, do I do it now and it causes just a problem for me, or is it now and it's a problem for both of us in this relationship?
Mm-hmm.
It's yes. But I think you did it really well in keeping it
Thank
so that
you.
you weren't like you say, like betraying his character kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. His ethics were there the entire way. You could see his struggle as he was going through it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely.
Good.
Um, yeah, we mentioned the library earlier that he arrives to work on. It's a magical library. And it's like a big setting for them coming together and getting to know each other. Were you inspired by any real life libraries that you visited?
Oh gosh, I would say not a single like particular library, but all of the best libraries. I'm thinking of so I lived in Vienna for a couple of years and studied there. And I worked a lot at the National Library in the Hofburg Palace, which is just stunning. Um, I also there was a we went out to I'm trying to I can't believe I'm blanking on it at this moment. There's a beautiful Austrian monastery on the Danube that went out on a tour of with a whole bunch of other postgrad students. And we walked into this library, and there was like this, because you imagine all these geeky, people who love books, otherwise he wouldn't be in
Hmm.
postgrad. And you walk into this room, and be like, oh, like all of us saying it at once.
Yeah.
So any of those just gorgeous, gorgeous multi-level libraries.
Yeah.
And I love rounded libraries for some reason. I don't know why. They feel cozy to me.
There's a
Mhm.
lovely little bit. She's got like a little secret cubby hole under the staircase. So
Mm.
anything that's got like little nooks and crannies and, like you say, multiple levels. It's just, yeah, I don't know why. We love it, don't we?
Can't
Yes.
say this is it. You can just give the basic description and everybody goes into their own little descriptive thing in their head, what they love with the ladders coming
Mm.
around. And
Yeah,
oh, we
that's
have
it.
those moments.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've done this book and you've explained a little bit, but what is coming next from you in both traditional and the self-publishing side? What have we got to look forward to?
Well, um, the next book in this trilogy, Enchanting the Fey Queen, tells the story of Lorelei, a very different queen in the Alliance. Um, it's Enchanting the Fey Queen. She I don't want to spoil too much from book one, but certainly by the
Yeah.
end of book one, you know who she's going to be with.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. I love when you're like, oh, it's that character.
It's
It's
that
gonna be that
one.
character. Yes. That's gonna be so good.
and Lorelei's is more of a enemies to lovers because he knows who she is and she knows who he is, but they've also obsessed with each other and etc. um, so I have had a lot of fun writing that, editing that. I think I said earlier I've got one more week to finish my edit, so it's getting so close to being done.
Yeah.
And so that's going to come out. The current publication date being talked about is next February 2026. In the meantime, I have another novella coming out sometime this summer. I don't have a date for it yet, but it's a sequel to a different novella I released last year called A Marriage of Undead Inconvenience,
Nice.
where a passionate scholar and a grumpy, secluded vampire are pressured and tricked into a marriage that neither of them wants. And then they end up teaming together to get back at the people who forced them into it, solve a supernatural mystery, and of course, fall in love along the way. So the next series, the next story in this series is A Honeymoon of Grave Consequence. And they end up doing a grand tour of Europe. And
Brilliant.
it's going, yeah, this is a fun one because my original thought was, I'll just write this one story. This will be fun. And I released it on Patreon. Everyone was like, but what happens in the honeymoon? What happens next? So it is now an official series, The Unexpected Adventures of Lady and Lord Riven. So
Brilliant. I've read that one as well. Yeah, which is good. I was just going to say, is it a bit of a theme? I've noticed you have Saskia's a bit like it, and even in Good Neighbours, your heroines kind of like they're quite academic and they have their work and they want to concentrate on it. Then there's like this pull that they want to just leave me alone. I want to go be in my library or my laboratory.
I have definitely written more than one.
Yeah.
Not all of them. I will say my Regency Dragons series, I've got 2 books in that trilogy so far, and neither of the first 2 heroines is at all scholarly or academic.
Yeah.
And Lorelai is not at all in Enchanting the Fae Queen, but it is something I enjoy doing because probably because I'm an obsessive geek who loves my work. I don't know.
If it fits, if the shoe fits, you wear it and you go with it.
What were you going to say, Jess? Sorry.
No, I was going to say,
you
had me earlier at Undead, and then you said Regency Dragons, and just my brain just...
That's awesome.
Mm.
Yes. Right. So I think that's everything we've got for Wooing the Witch Queen. Thank you so much for joining us for this one.
Thank you for having me.
It's out now, isn't it? Available in both the US and the UK now, because there was slightly different publication dates.
That's right.
Yeah, and as you said, you've got a whole raft of other novels as well and novellas and stuff out there that are just, they're brilliant to dip into.
Feels time till next February.
That's it. So we'll be back with Stephanie the week after next, when she's going to join us to talk about her guest pick, a book she's really enjoyed, which is a novella as well, isn't it? Actually,
it is. I love novellas.
Kind of a theme, The Sorceress Transcendent, and that will be on the 18th of March. And next week for us, we've got our monthly book chat episode, which
we have indeed. So come and join us for that one, and we hope you've enjoyed this as much as I really have.
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you.
I really did. Thank you.